Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park and I'm taking us through a series of 5-minute teachings on Jesus in the Old Testament. Originally this was based on a book that I wrote that covered basically 40 days, an introduction and then one chapter for each of the 39 books of the Old Testament. However, this is taking us a lot longer than 40 days because Jesus is not just appearing once in each Old Testament book, but again and again on almost every page. And we are now in 1 Samuel. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we have that moment where, Samuel, the book, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel are both named after him. But in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we see Samuel being rejected and feeling rejected. And the reason was because he was leading the people of Israel as the prophet appointed by God and as a judge. He was really following in the line of the judges in the book of Judges. And Samuel was rejected because the people decided they didn't want to be led by a prophet or a judge anymore. They wanted to be led by a king. And their reason for wanting to be led by a king was they said, well, all the other nations around us, they've got kings, so why can't we have a king? You know, I've heard this foolish kind of reasoning even from Christians. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses do this, why don't we? The fact that a false cult or another religion does something is not a reason why Christians should do it. We need to obey the word of the Lord. And so Samuel was not impressed that the people were asking for a king. It was not a good thing either, because by appointing a king, they started off, Saul let them down pretty badly. Then David was a good king, and Solomon was good for a while, but then went downhill, basically backslid. And after Solomon, it all went from bad to worse with the kings. I did a series once on the kings of Israel and Judah. I called it the Biblical Game of Thrones. And it was shocking, some of the stuff those kings got up to. And they really were not a blessing to the country as a whole. So they were asking for a king. It was going to end badly. And Samuel tried to persuade them not to, but they wouldn't listen to him. And basically God said to Samuel, you know what, Samuel, don't get too upset about it. They are not just rejecting you, they are rejecting me in their desire to have a king to rule over them. Because God was the king over the people of Israel. The judges, the prophets, everything else, they were there basically underneath God's authority. But now the people wanted a king because they didn't want God to be their king anymore, basically. Well, that reminds me of what Jesus said in John chapter 15, verses 20 to 21. Whenever God said to Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Jesus said to his disciples, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. Jesus said that people will, because they hate Jesus, they will hate us. And we're not to take it personally. We're not to say, well, it's because I'm this, that, or the other. If people hate you for being a Christian, it's not because of some failing in you. It's because you're a child of God. And they hate God, they hate Jesus, they're going to hate you as well. Jesus was rejected as ruler. Just as Samuel was rejected as a ruler by the people, Jesus himself was rejected as a ruler. Most notably, when Pilate brought out Jesus before he sent him to his crucifixion and said, trying to get the people to see things differently, Pilate said to them, behold your king. And they said, we have no king but Caesar. And so Samuel being rejected as king was simply a forerunner and a foreshadowing of Jesus being rejected as king. The one king that would have been the perfect king for Israel, and they rejected him. They wanted Saul to be a king. They wanted all these other kings. But when they had the opportunity to have the perfect incarnate Son of God as king, they said, we have no king but Caesar. Jesus may have been despised. He may have been rejected, but we worship him as our King and the Lord of our lives. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.